There is one thing that I hope people take away from these videos, and that would be the importance of proper maintenance. I suppose the risk of neglect would come in a close second, but what happens when somebody takes it a little too far? And by too far, I mean, what happens when you put nearly double the amount of oil into an engine that it requires? This is an all-wheel drive 3-liter supercharged engine out of a 2017 Jaguar XE with just 66,000 miles on it. This car was bought by a yard in the Chicago area that I know, and they told me that even though the car was totaled, smashed in the rear, the engine would barely turn over. It took a lot of force to turn the engine over, and then they drained nearly 10 quarts, a little over 9 quarts of oil out of this engine. It requires 5.7 quarts. So that's a problem. But what does that do? What kind of damage will we find? Well, I don't know. We haven't had a known situation like that on the channel, but today we're going to tear this down and find out. Jaguar's 3-liter supercharged V6 is offered in several different Jaguar models, the XE, the XF, the F-Pace, and I think it might be available in some Land Rover products. These engines are kind of unique because it is built on the AJ series family of engine, the V8, the 5-liter V8. It is literally built on a V8 block. It is just missing the rear cylinders. So you have all of the same amount of parts, the same design, same architecture, the same amount of complexities, whereas the 5-liter V8, the supercharged, makes 500 horsepower. I've driven those cars. They run really well. This makes 340 horsepower. Now, I'm not trying to sound partial. I know some of the vehicles that this engine comes in never got the 5-liter, so we never know how fast or how great that would be with the 5-liter in it. But it makes you wonder how hard that swap is. At least that's where my head's at. Another thing that was mentioned when I bought this engine is that the front of it is covered in oil. And it is. It's quite wet. So I guess at this point, the next step would be turn it over. Oh, that doesn't feel good. It takes a lot of force. I hear something bad. But the good news is it turns over enough to get this thing apart. I think what I'm listening to is this vacuum pump. It's making fart sounds. It's very inappropriate. Now you might be wondering, what's next? Where do you start? How do you start taking this apart? Well, you just do what I normally do. You take bolts out until parts fall off. Or in this case, a bunch of clips. All right, I'm done. I'm just kidding. Hey, first part's off the engine. I think this is how you get it into neutral. It's like a release cable. Those don't have normal shifters. But then again, nothing does. I suppose we'll go for the plugs now, and we'll see what it takes to get those out and what they look like. Now onto the other bank. Nice and simple. We have good and bad here. The good is that all the plugs are the same kind. They all came out nice and easy. I don't see any smashed electrodes, smashed straps. Everything looks okay. Well, okay, it doesn't look good. All of these are very dark. Normally you like to see like a tan look, but these are really dark. So either this thing was running really rich, or maybe it was burning some stuff it shouldn't have been burning. The odd thing here, and I guess the most concerning, is this was the middle cylinder on the left-hand bank, and it has signs of moisture. There's little bitty rusty pits on the edge of that plug. So who knows what we will find. Well, before we start taking any more parts off, I gotta know if it turns over any easier now that there are no spark plugs in it. No. It doesn't sound good, and it doesn't feel good either. Now I think it's time to spend just a little bit of time taking a few of the connectors off of this engine. I'm just glad there's not too many of them. Oh, this harness is nice and nope, it's not simple. There's just some stuff down here. Yeah, that was pretty easy. And we just have to finish up everything else. We're making progress, I think. I could be wrong. Now, normally I'm not this rough with harnesses, but this one's cut. So I'm just trying to get it off expeditedly. Pesky ground in a wonderful location right here. I think we're getting close to actually getting this harness off. How much more could there be? Ooh, I shouldn't say that. Look, this connector is a pretty pesky one. That wasn't really that bad. And I'm not kidding. That wasn't terrible. I've done worse. BMW. While we're at the caboose of the engine, let's just go ahead and start zipping some more bolts out. I guess I might have to take this coolant pipe out of the way. We'll do that next. It's more of a manifold than anything. And in fact, if you watch the last 3 liter, you'll remember the amount of damage done to this engine from this amazing piece of plastic that also has more bolts holding it in. Hey, a thing is off. Almost. Now it's off. Now you can see a better look at where that rear cylinder would have been, here and here. It's peculiar. Now, I read all the comments on the last video, and most people said they did that for cost, and so they didn't have to crash test a new vehicle, because I guess when you design a new engine and it's shaped different, you have to re-crash test a vehicle. And I guess that it gets expensive. I mean, they're just crashing cars. So this is original. It's got a 16 date code. And unlike the last one I tore down, this seems to be in decent condition. If only this were metal. Got a couple more bolts for the fuel feed line. I did want to get this removed. Perfect. Now we need to clear some more parts. And we're going to start with some of this stuff. So ultimately we want to get the supercharger off next. That was simple. Next we're going to get this fuel line removed. Ooh, still got gas in it. All right, we're almost ready to start on the supercharger, but first let's get this coolant manifold and this simple stuff right here. Oh no, that broke. What will I do? I for sure don't want to break this plastic. Hey, that feels looserish. This is not the right pair of pliers for this, and I know that. Having a great time. I need blue. Well, this is kind of a challenge here. I would not advise you working on your vehicle the way I work on these engines. I'm just saying. Oh, it broke. I think. Oh, cool. There's like a little aluminum coupler with 2 O-rings between 2 pieces of plastic. Sure, that never is a point of failure. Now we can remove the top plenum. Do you call it a lid on these? Oh, that was a big bolt. And we've got these bolts in the middle. Let's see if we can break the seal. Yeah, it's loose now. Well, let's take a look inside of here. I don't see anything too alarming. I don't know what all this speckled stuff is. But the lobes on the supercharger, the rotors look good. Not a ton of wear. There's also not a ton of play in the pulley. It doesn't look like a whole lot of stuff has gone through here, so that's good. I think we can pull this blower now. And if you're wondering, this has water-to-air intercoolers in this lid. Now it's time to pull the supercharger. Let's see if we can just get this to lift up a little bit. Let's take a look at these intake ports. Yuck. Looks pretty bad for 66,000 miles. I wonder how often they recommend an induction service for these. I'm sure some of you techs can chime in. I'd say this one needed it. I don't see anything too alarming. It's just dirty. Next, the fuel injectors. Sometimes these come right out, and sometimes they don't. Well, the rail's off. What I should be able to do is turn these sideways so that I can get the valve cover by them. Oh, these are really stuck in here. Hey, there's one. Now, I will say this. Generally, I don't sell these injectors. They're not very expensive new. So if I damage them, it's okay. Out of curiosity, let's see if we can get this one out. This one turned really easy. Okay, next I need to tackle the other bank of injectors, and then we got to do something with this fuel line. I'm sure we'll have good luck with this bank. Ooh, a lot of fuel and one injector. Let's see if I can rotate these pretty easily. It's a lot of force. Oh no, I broke the O-ring. 2 out of 6. Not so great. This one's really stuck. Now the left valve cover. Oh, like that's just going to come right off. Oh, wow. That's pretty clean. Well, this is incredibly clean. Normally, I'm not amazed by the cleanliness of engines, but this looks nice. I just pushed that, and keep in mind there's no oil pressure keeping the tensioners taut, so there's going to be some slack here. I don't necessarily think that is the problem. I don't see any trouble at all. Everything looks good. Let's go to the other side. If I only had one complaint to choose from about this engine, and I'm not trying to say that this engine is a terrible engine by any stretch, but my one gripe, my biggest gripe on this engine is the sheer stupidity related to this fuel line. As you can see, there is a junction here. You can remove this nut, but this piece is a hard line, and it goes all the way down to the fuel pumps down here on the oil pan. That's a whole other topic. But the fuel line covers the valve cover, and valve cover gaskets are a somewhat regular service for a lot of vehicles. Pretty much everything with an engine in it at some point will need valve cover gaskets. Did they just not plan on the vehicle lasting long enough for that to happen? Or are you supposed to take all of this stuff off to take this valve cover off, which is, I'm sure, super accessible in the vehicle, especially with these all-wheel drive cars. Or are you supposed to bend the fuel line? I know I made the exact same argument on the last one of these I tore down. I just think it's so incredibly short-sighted. They just had to put a union right here. That's it. That's all they had to do. A little union right there. Everything would have been fine. But no. Fuel lines run behind this bracket. It gets better, folks. You have to remove the motor mount bracket because the line snakes behind it. And it's on this stud. There's that line. Now we can get the right side valve cover off. Same deal on this side. Everything looks perfect. I don't see any wear on the cam lobes. I don't see any damage in the timing system that I can see so far. It looks good. Next, we'll get the exhaust manifolds off. Next, we'll remove the oil filter. See what this looks like. Ooh, it's got some forbidden glitter. Anti-seize. That's not supposed to be in there. Sorry, Brett. Exactly what I wanted to do. So don't pay any attention to the way this filter looks. I kind of just wanted to test the filter's ability to be a chop saw brake. But what's more important is that there is some silvery goodness or badness in this filter. The forbidden glitter has been found. And while it is pretty bad in volume, it's not as bad as we've seen. We've definitely seen filters loaded with more metal than this. And there is a tinge of copper color there. And if you look at this part of the filter, this is like some anti-seize stuff on here. It's got a little mangled. Now it's time to clean up the front of this engine. We'll get this bracket and tensioner and idler out. Yee, look at how coated that is. Next, it's that time of the program that we need to remove the water pump. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, this looks pretty good. It doesn't look like it's been leaking. And judging by everything I see, it looks like it's an original pump. I mean, with 66,000 miles, I'd hope this is an original water pump. Spins good. I could open this up, but I'm not going to do that. Just know that this is a good water pump. Next, we'll get the upper timing covers off. I feel like I missed some bolts. Let's pry on it. Well, I don't really see anything too alarming. I expected to find some metal deposits, but I don't see it. Let's go to the other side. Yeah, it's pretty much the same deal on this side. It looks good. Next, we'll get the crank pulley off. I think this just pops right off, right? Yeah. And then this, well, that was easy, but we don't have it all the way off yet. Now, this is a right-hand thread. Hopefully this is enough, but I doubt it is. Right, well, I moved it, but now I gotta do some other stuff. The rod isn't long enough.
Not a chronic problem.
Let's try this again. Get a bolt in place as a spacer. It might work. It's dying. Oh, you can do it. Come on, one more time. Okay, one more time. You're so close. You're right there. You made it. Now the lower timing cover. Well, that wasn't very well sealed. So the timing system looks pretty decent from what I can tell here. There's a little RTV at the tip of the crankshaft. I wonder if this has been apart before. 66,000 miles, I'd really hope not. But I don't see anything wrong. Do you guys see anything wrong? Oh, looks pretty okay. Now it's time to peel all the timing system off. We're going to start with the tensioners. I'm just going to look the other way and it'll be perfectly fine. See, it's fine. These are oil pressure fed tensioners. In pretty good shape. Yeah, see, you don't have to be scared of it. Just zip these out. I think that comes out. Yeah. Wow, look at all the metal on that plastic guide. Just wipe it off. Guide's actually in really good shape. Just a little bit of metal deposits, that'll clean up. This one though, stuff is unhappy here. Let's unbolt this other rail and we'll do that on the other side. Yeah, there's all kinds of metal. Sparkly bits. Looks like bass boat paint. Updated rail so it doesn't wear into this like the earlier 5 liters did. It's a nice part. And this one just falls out now. Yeah, the chain was definitely slamming some metal into everything. Good. Now we have a chain. Let's see if we can get this off. And we can almost get this off. And we're off. It's a decent looking chain right there. I'll tell you what. We'll just put that over here. And now I got this one. I don't know if this one's going to come all the way out. We've run into this problem in the past. I think I just got to pull the cams out to get this one out. Yeah, we're just going to let that dangle there. This will slide right off. Now is that time to start cramming these caps off. Well, these aren't tight at all. Are they supposed to be? You know what? I'm just going to zip these out because I can't tell if this has been apart or not. I want to say no, but it is imperative that you keep the caps in order, so that way when you find out the head is junk, you can throw it all away. I'm just kidding. Oh boy, I see some bad happening. And the final cam from this head. Oh, now I can get the chain off.
Nice.
Well, there's some scratches and damage to these journals. And some wear to the buckets. But that's not, the bucket wear is not really that big of a deal. Now, I don't think these are destroyed by any stretch. But when you get to like this front one's pretty rough. Let's go look at those cams and the cam caps. The cams, well, they clearly have had some debris run through them. Not all the journals are wiped out, and they might polish out. Probably not. Hey, look. That goes somewhere else. The caps also have some damage. I don't know if that renders the head junk. I think these are decent enough that they could probably be cleaned up, but they are certainly not ready to slap on. Yikes. Maybe not the cams. That part looks okay. Next, I need to remove this tube, and this tube actually goes all the way down to the bottom of the pan so that you can suck the oil out of it so you don't have to get underneath it for an oil change. I like that. Is this going to be like a dip? No, this comes right out. And now some perimeter bolts. And a couple of bolts in the middle of the block. Time for the head bolts. All right, now the head should lift right off. Oh, there's lots of coolant, and I don't have a pan.
What am I doing?
I got a pan now. It's a little too late. Oh, I caught a little bit. That's a problem. Well, we're already here. We might as well do some science. That's not good. So this has a problem, and I'm going to guess it has something to do with the metal we found in the oil filter and in the cylinder head. Head gasket. That looks good. So this cylinder looks bad. As you can see, the top of the piston is clean. And I would imagine the bottom is too, but there's some oil, and you can see some heavy wear to the block. Now, I would suspect that that is clean from making contact with the cylinder head. I don't see any valve marks in it, so that's good. This looks okay here, but there's some pretty deep grooves. I mean, it's hard to see what that one looks like. Let's move on to the other side, but first let's check out that cylinder head. Well, the head doesn't look too bad. I will say you can definitely tell the piston made contact here. But it doesn't look like it deformed the cylinder head enough to cause any kind of damage. Look at that, it's all nice and clean and shiny. And that's what happens when the piston hits it. It squeezes all the carbon off of it. Before we get started on this head, I need to remove this oil filter housing. Well, that was easy. And while I'm here, this coolant manifold. Unfortunately, these cam caps don't snap, crackle, or pop, so we're just going to zip them out. It's going to be fine. Some of these journals are pretty rough. And then some are beautiful. I think it just matters if there was any debris from bearing material wedged between the cams and their journals and the caps. The intake caps don't look too bad. They're not perfect. They're not awful. The cams are worse than the caps, which is ironic that the cams are cast iron and the caps are aluminum. There's actually still some bearing material still on that camshaft. Yeah, they're not great, but I don't know if I'd call them junk. The cams probably need more work than they're worth. I'm not sure. That one's not too bad. Yeah, you can even see that material on that journal. Yeah, it looks pretty bad. Now we have some perimeter bolts. Next, we'll crack the head bolts loose. And what's behind head number 2? Coolant. Head gasket looks good. It's time for some science. That didn't sound right. So this front cylinder definitely has some moisture sitting in it, but more importantly, look at that deep wear and shiny spots. That means that this piston hit the head too. That one looks okay from what we can see. And we can see the beginning of some wear right there, but no marks on the piston like it made contact. The head looks pretty good. We can definitely tell, just wipe our thumb here. Look at that. It's the mark from the piston cleaning it. Now again, this usually doesn't damage the head unless it's much worse than this. Next, I'm going to turn this thing over. I want to make sure that all the pistons reach top dead center. Nope, I guess that's not going to happen. Let's get the big bar. All right, let's see if it'll move now. You would think without all the valve train, this would just be nice and easy, but okay, that one reaches top dead center. This does not feel good. Let's see what happens when we... That's not good. That's bad. It looks like everything reaches TDC, but we have 2 cylinders that are very unhappy. Next, I'm going to remove this high pressure fuel. Actually, this is the low pressure line that feeds the pumps. Now I'm going to turn this thing upside down so that we can pull the pan. I think we're good. These are for keeping them quiet so they don't sound ticky. It's fine. Everything's fine. There's a slight large mess. It's well lubricated now. That one wasn't under tension. I'll go ahead and remove this vacuum pump while we're here. Now, it is time to pull the oil pan. Before I pry the pan up, I need to remove this steel rear main seal plate. This should be pretty simple. Oh, that's not good. Yeesh. Ooh. 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 Everywhere. It's all bad. That's not where bearings go, but that's where they are. That's pretty interesting. I don't understand why they're shaped like that. It's shredded itself. That thing's loaded. And then when you come down here, there's an entire, not an entire, that's a large chunk of bearing foil right there. Oop, dropped it. It'll never be the same. Look at the shape of this. Why is it shaped that way? And then when you come over here, more of it. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Well, if it looks this good above the pan, what does the pan look like? We'll get there in a second. There's still more oohs and ahs. Why is this all spiraled this way? It's like somebody was drilling in here. I've never seen anything like that. There's another piece here. Why is it shaped that way? I kind of want to touch it. I'm going to do it. It's not that thick. I expected some depth to that, but there isn't any. Lots more little slivers, like, I don't know what it's called when you drill something and that metal spirals off of it. I'm sure there's a word for it, but I am not a machinist. Look at the Bass Boat Forbidden Glitter paint going on in here. It's thick. I mean, it's not super thick, but it's not supposed to be like this. Let's take this pickup tube. It's a bearing pickup tube. Well, we're leaking. And while we're here, we'll get this tube removed. All right, we're going to just unbolt some stuff. There, it's fine. See? Fine. It's totally fine. Now, there is a connector for the oil pump. I'm going to see how hard that is to get out. Hopefully it just pushes right through. Just going to give it a little tap. Nice and easy. Now we can remove the oil pump, the cam that drives the fuel pumps, and the window tray all at one time.
Ooh.
That's not great. Well, let's see how much we got in this thing. Oh, there's more. I feel like I'm on an episode of Hoarders. Well, I don't think I got it all, but I got a lot of it. I'm going to give it a quick brake clean bath so we can see it. I have never seen bearing fragments look like this. This thing must have been whittling away at itself.
Wow.
That is awesome. Are we going to take this apart? You bet your overpasses. That's not the right size for that. It's fine. Ooh, that's a problem. I think that is the right size for it. That's not a good thing. Oh, no! I had to make one stupid joke, and now I can't get the bolt out. What if I just take the next size socket up and hammer it in? Problem is, it's a lot larger. They don't make a T35. But that worked. And the oil pump is out. Let's take this oil pump apart. Just give it a little tap. Now this doesn't have any value because it had a bunch of metal run through it, and I would never sell something like this. Wow, that takes a lot of force to turn. There must be a ton of bad stuff in there. Let's do the sensible thing. That worked. Oh, this is stiff. Without this piece in here, that barely turns. Wow. Hurts, actually. I don't know if this comes out this way. Oh, yes, it does. We're doing it. Well, that would explain why. Well, these gears have definitely seen some debris run through there. And I think the reason this was so hard to turn over is if you can look at the shaft, some metal found its way between the shaft and the housing. Look at that housing. That is really damaged. It's one of the worst looking oil pumps we've seen in a while. Yeah, it's not good. And finally, we will remove the fuel pump cam. That's bad. Look at all the bearing material in there. It's pretty chewed up. Now looking at the rotating assembly, first, this is where the missing 2 cylinders are. It has these little balance. Well, that one's a balancer. And then that looks normal. Those look normal. Those are not normal. So let's see how much play they have. Oh, I can't move the other one, but they're both very bad. Now that it is just a rotating assembly, I want to see how much force it takes to turn this over. Keep in mind that oil pump was bad. It's still bad. It's a little bit easier. Yeah, not good. All right, next we're going to take the rods and pistons out. We're going to turn this over until they're at the top. Wow, that takes a lot of force.
Wow.
That is impressive. Look at that. There's supposed to be a bearing in there in both of these. I'm sure this was quiet. Barely hear it over wind noise. Let's crack these loose. Oh, that's bad. See how hard these are to come out. Wow, that one almost fell out. Turn it over to the next two. It's still very difficult. I have a feeling we're not done seeing damage here. That's impressive. So those are the bearing shells, and they have very clearly spun. I almost can't remove them. I cannot remove them. I'm sure it'll turn a lot easier now. No, what? Oh, why is that so tight?
Why?
Crack the final two loose. Can almost get that out by hand, but need a little help. Once again, I'm going to try to turn it over. We're going to see how much force is required. A lot. So we have more than just rod bearing trouble. Let's get these main caps unbolted. Pull the crank. What can we do about this? I know that's not the ideal way to do that. think this one will come off. Now there is a much easier way to do this. You can use a slide hammer, but my slide hammer attachment, the bolt for this is too large, and I don't really feel like drilling that out because that might make that less useful for other applications. So we're just going to do it the hard way, and then I guess I should look for a better attachment. Well, that worked. That was not the thrust. All right, now this crank should just boop right out of there. Well, let's start out with the rod bearings. First two cylinders look like this. And I think the reason they look like this is because of the split journal design of the crankshaft, because they don't share a journal, and they are rubbing against each other. So as the bearings come apart, they do this, I guess. That's what caused that's bizarre. But you can definitely tell that these got hot. Lots of friction, these two cylinders. And then those were spun, and those were spun. You can tell by the way that they look that they moved in the journal, which is bad. You never want to see that. And this one was also pretty hot. This one wasn't so bad. And then when you get down to the last two, well, these bearings are just normal bad. The rods look good. Now the pistons, lots of skirt wear. I didn't see any other damage. Like from striking the cylinder head, sometimes they can crack the crown or ring lands, but I don't see that on these. They all have some pretty good skirt wear. I think there's 2 sellable rods and pistons out of this. I mean, if you guys want any of these parts for your desk or whatever, I'd much rather sell it than, you know, throw it in the scrap bin. But as far as being able to reuse it, looks like 2 rods and pistons, and that might even be questionable. The main bearings are ugly. They're less ugly than the rod bearings, but that is not a high bar to climb over. Now, what's odd about this one is that it has more wear on one side than the other. And normally when you see that, it's from a bent crankshaft, but I don't see that in this situation, although I don't have a way to test that. I don't have a way to test run out on the crank. Speaking of the crank, she's borked. Dunsky. It's kind of a bummer. I sold the crank out of the last one for like $700 or $800. I was hoping to get another one, but instead I've got, what is it, 4 or 5 cents a pound in scrap. I mean, I suppose you could fix this. A repaired crankshaft that has gone through this is never going to have the value of one that's never had that kind of damage. And this is where those 2 journals would be. I can't imagine that being bent there. The inside of the block looks pretty normal. I didn't see any major concerns here, but let's flip it over and look at these boards. Well, pretty significant wear. I don't know if these can go overbore, if you need to sleeve them, or if it's even worth it. Those aren't as bad, but that one is pretty bad. The other bank, pretty consistent to what we saw on the other side.
Wow.
One interesting fact, the all-wheel drive version of this engine holds 5.7 quarts of oil, whereas the rear-wheel drive version, since it doesn't have to have room for an axle shaft through the center of the pan, holds 7.7 quarts of oil. That's still not over 9 quarts of oil. No, that still doesn't make any sense. At first I thought, well, maybe they read the wrong statistic in their owner's manual, and then I realized that nobody really reads their owner's manual anymore. On top of that, this vehicle doesn't have a dipstick. It has buttons and knobs, so it's even less convenient to check your oil, if you ask me. I'd much rather pull a stick than spin an iDrive thing or press buttons to try to find how much oil is in the engine after you've run it for 5 minutes or whatever the parameters are. But that doesn't explain how the vehicle had a bad engine and it was totaled miraculously. Now, I would venture to say that no one has ever committed insurance fraud and wrecked a vehicle with a bad engine to get out of paying for a replacement. That would never happen. Nope, we've actually seen that on this channel before. I tore down an N54 that destroyed a cylinder and also caught fire in the trunk. Either way, this engine has a lot of good parts. It also has a lot of bad parts. When you overfill an engine, the crankshaft will turn the oil into foam, which is not oil, it's foam. And when foam reaches that pickup, what happens at that point is it aerates the oil, which means that you lose oil pressure, and really bad things happen, as we saw. It was pretty interesting to see how the two bearings ate themselves and spun those spiral-shaped pieces of metal. Never seen that before, and I don't know if we'll ever see that again unless it's something like this that has a split journal design. Either way, this was a first for us. We know kind of what happened here. We also still have a lot of unanswered questions. Someone messed up, and then someone didn't want to be held accountable. And ultimately, us as salvage yards, we are the one that takes the hit. We buy the car at the auction, assuming that since the rear end is damaged, and it looked like a body shop had cut part of the quarter off to find more damage before they considered the car totaled, that we're safe to assume the engine's good. And, well, like my dad used to tell me, when you assume, it makes a donkey out of you and me. Yeah, kids watch this. Sorry. I really hope you enjoyed this teardown. If you'd like to buy any parts out of this engine or anything else I've torn down or off of this beautiful 74,000 mile 10th anniversary Miata, I know, another Miata. Well, it's kind of what I do. I'm going to leave our email in the video description, or you can go to importapart.com. I've been uploading our inventory just about every single week. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.